Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's school committee meeting. Daryl, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a consent agenda. Actually, just before we get started, we have three members tonight. Erica and Matt are both busy with back-to-school night activities, coincidentally enough. But they're not back-to-school activities in Littleton. But we do have a consent agenda, the minutes from September 19th, 2019, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. We have two opportunities in our meetings for input from interested citizens, one now and one at the end of the meeting. Are there any interested citizens who want to speak before the school committee? Seeing none. We'll dive right into recognition. We have Madeline O'Meara to give us the student rep report.
Hello. So for Shaker Lane, they wanted to thank the PTA for hosting Tuesday evening's family book fair. Everyone had a wonderful night, and the students enjoyed a visit from Dogman, which was the highlight of the evening. And yesterday, Shaker Lane participated in the International Walk and Roll to School Day. Many families joined Shaker Lane staff at Long Lake and walked to school to promote this event that is hosted by Safe Routes to School. And they hope for the same in the spring. At Russell Street, students are doing a great job earning their stripes for the new initiative at Russell Street. And there's also a Title I informational meeting on October 15th. At the middle school, Kids Night Out for 6th graders was held last Friday. And high school, there's a lot going on because this week was homecoming week. So we have Spirit Week this week, a football game tomorrow at 7, a pep rally tomorrow, and homecoming night is also Saturday. And we also have SATs this weekend and PSATs next weekend, and college planning night is tonight for parents.
Excellent. Thank you. Great. All right. Next up, recognition on our LPS presenters at Massachusetts Computer Using Educators Conference.
Right. A number of years ago, we created a goal in our district, and it was to encourage our staff to take some of the things that they're doing in their classrooms and programs and offer some advice to districts throughout the state and beyond. Very happy to report this evening that this year at MassQ, which is a wonderful technology conference, we have 7 LPS educators presenting. And you can see the topics that they're presenting on the screen. And actually we have 8 because Tracy Turner is the social media ambassador as well. So 8 of our staff are involved, are heavily involved with the MassQ conference. And as I'm thinking, it's actually 9 because Heidi McGregor is on the executive board as well. So we're well represented at this conference, and it's attended by many districts within Massachusetts and beyond. So I'd like to just acknowledge them and congratulate them on taking their gifts outside our district and helping other districts. The only other item I'd like to mention tonight, we're off to a very strong start to our fall athletic season. So special thanks to our students, coaches, and of course our community for supporting the programs.
Kelly, so I think the last 2 years, or last year we had 2 state championships in the signs, but I haven't seen them show up.
Did you drive your Tesla around town?
Yes. As I drive my automobile around.
360 vision, 360 degree vision.
I was just wondering.
We'll check on that. That's a good point.
Because I know we had gotten 2 more state championships.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what the process is for getting those done, but we should make sure it gets done.
Yeah.
You'll have an idea of why they're not here anyway. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning it.
Yep.
All right, we're going to go into presentations. We have one on professional development highlights from 2018-19 and the plan for this current year, 2019-2020.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you some highlights from last year's professional development. There are many ways in which our staff can gain professional development. Our district schedules 12 early release professional development days throughout the school year, 2 of which are district-led, 4 of which are school-led, and 6 of which are faculty-led. So in addition to these opportunities, our teachers also go out and find workshops, conferences, courses, and seminars that are of interest and benefit to them and their students. Our staff do this during the school year, but also on weekends, at nights, and most certainly also during the summer. Our tuition assistance program helps cover or defray the cost of such workshops, courses, seminars, and conferences. Thus, you can see that there are a variety of opportunities for professional learning within and outside of Littleton. So during our presentation this evening, we would like to highlight district-led PD, faculty-led PD sessions, conferences, and courses, as well as provide a brief overview of what we have planned for this current school year. There's really no better way to describe some of these professional development opportunities than to ask the teachers to share their experiences with you. So therefore, we have a few staff members here this evening that have contributed to this presentation and who have either participated in or facilitated some really great professional development over the past year. So presenting to you this evening, we have Andrea Romano, an elementary art teacher, Emily Hosfeld, a high school art teacher, Michelle Hirth, a special education teacher and transition specialist, Liz Kelly, a high school world language teacher, Dan Hogan, a high school science teacher. Unfortunately, Rebecca Roper, Allison Bullock, and Amy McGrath are not able to be present this evening. However, they did contribute to the presentation, and I will speak of their contribution later. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask Andrea Romano to come up and share the faculty-led PD session that she facilitated last spring.
I'm actually going to swing around this way. First of all, it's nice to see everyone this evening. I photographed, not photographed, but I photocopied a quick handout that I used as an energizer for the staff, the PD that I led last winter and spring. It was connected to creativity as a conduit for connecting, and focus on that was mindfulness. So the professional development session was actually a 2-day session. So the first day that we met, there were about 25 people who participated across the district in K-5, which was a really nice number. Our focus was on day 1, we did the Energizer, which was a focus on gratitude and just kind of getting people thinking and talking about different things that they found in their life to bring them joy and that they had gratitude for. And then what we did is we also created the gratitude tree. So they chose one thing, and it was around Valentine's Day. So we did hearts, and we made a piece of art together that was connected to what everyone was thankful for, which was just a nice way to bring everyone together. After that, we all worked on crafting a gratitude journal. I had purchased watercolor paper. We used some really nice materials so that people could bring their journal home with them and just kind of, write things down. I think, one of the things, as we all know, is our lives are so busy, and it's really hard to take 2 minutes or find 3 minutes in your day to keep track of things that that you feel really good about. I know I tried doing that starting back into the start of the year. I got to May, and then I kind of fell off of that. So anyhow, we made our journals. And then we had, as you all know, we had a kiln installed at Russell Street School last summer. So we crafted clay projects, which you'll see in the center slide on the bottom. So we made those on day 1, and then the second day when we came back together later on in April, teachers actually glazed them, and then I got those back to them later on in May. It just was a really nice way for staff to come together. I think a lot of our professional development is so focused on really student-driven development. And it was a nice way for all of us as a staff to come together and kind of like focus on ourselves for a little chunk of time in a way to then make ourselves more present for our students. One of the things that I focused on was everything that we did and everything that we talked about was how can we then bring it back to our classrooms, which is a really important piece also when you're talking about professional and personal development. And it was just a great way to spend time together and connect with your colleagues. So that was creativity as a conduit for connecting. I didn't know if anyone had any questions about that.
Anybody have any questions?
How'd it go?
How did it go?
Right, I mean, it's great.
Sure. I had a lot
got
of
my
feedback, and
question
actually,
here.
I just was connecting with a colleague at school because I needed to stop in for a few minutes, and she had participated. She's like, Andrea, that was just like the best professional development that I've attended in a really long time, and it was something that everyone just really needed at the time. So like timing sometimes is really important too, but it brought people a lot of joy, and everyone just kind of was able to catch their breath. And we don't do that very often. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
So next we'll have Emily Hosfeld, a high school art teacher.
Hi. So in the spring, I met with, I led a school-based PD with teachers from PE, science, art, and music. And we were discussing the topic of student use of technology, social media, mostly cell phones, and how we could encourage them to be more aware and mindful of how they're using their time and what they're doing on social media. With the goal of just talking about what's going on in our classrooms, what we're seeing in students, and then how could we maybe educate students to use their phones more mindfully. And when we talk about mindfulness for this topic, it's approaching it with a mindset of curiosity and non-judgment. So we came up with a survey to give to students to start the discussion just on their attitudes and how long they're spending on their phone. And something I started doing was using a screen time tracker, and I was curious, are students using screen time trackers, and how much time are they really spending on their phone? And this was something that had come up in conversation in the classroom, and I just wanted to put some numbers behind it. So on average, it seemed like most of our students were spending 3 to 5 hours on their phone. And then it's the first thing they do when they wake up. And this often comes up in conversation when students talk about how long homework is taking them. Well, how much are you multitasking while you're doing your homework? And it seemed like more than 3/4 always or often had their phones right by their side while they were studying and trying to get things done. And that, as teachers, we think, well, this might be affecting your memory and concentration and productivity, but they're not necessarily aware of it. And then also out of curiosity, is this a conflict with parents? Is anyone monitoring how long you are spending on your phone? So just some numbers, and there were some other questions. And then we watched a video about, they called it brain hacking, but it's just some insights into what the app developers, they know the neuroscience and the behavioral science behind habit formation, and how they're manipulating that to get everyone really hooked on their phones. And so we watched the video in our high school advisories, and then each advisor had a discussion, and I got some interesting feedback just from my own advisees and also other teachers. There was some resistance to the topic, as you might expect, but also sort of some unexpected comments, students saying that when they did have the opportunity to go camping or go away to camp or have family time without their phones, that those were some of their most enjoyable times. One student, I think, even said, I wish my parents hadn't bought this for me. And This is a thought project that I've had. I recently surveyed one of my classes, just another attitudes towards phones, and a majority do wish they spent less time on them, and aren't necessarily resistant to having these conversations. So it started an interesting conversation. That was the goal. And just to give you an idea on how my thinking around this topic had formed, I read Digital Minimalism, so looking at and formulating these conversations with students, but what are your goals, and are your daily habits supporting your goals, and how is the technology either supporting those or hijacking them? iGeneration, which is one of the books that Charity Bell recommended when she came to speak with us, just really highlighted the cultural shifts that I've been feeling in the 10 years I've been teaching. And then to formulate the survey questions, I did look at the Pew Institute because they have some interesting numbers, and it seemed like our students were right in line with the research they're doing. But also the power of habit, because one of the things that the technology is doing is changing our daily habits, and how do we reclaim some of those habits to reconnect and with the mindfulness and connection. I think Andrea and I are on the same wavelength, art teacher wavelength. But yes. So. Thank you.
Oh, no.
And, yeah.
Wait a second.
Okay.
Nora was just.
Because it's actually good. No, I actually applaud your effort here on it, because, you know, I don't know how many times I've been talking to somebody like this, and then they do this on it, in terms of how rude that is for a conversation, and really, did you need to look at that while we're having a conversation and stuff, and getting people more mindful of, you know, life does exist. If you put that down and talk to somebody, I think is critically important, because it will become more critical when they figure out later in life how to disconnect from work, or disconnect and actually enjoy their other time that they have. So
Yeah, and
thank you very much.
I think the thing that came through in our conversations was that the generation right now doesn't know another way. So they don't know another way to be without them unless they do that, have that curiosity in themselves and put the phone away.
I also think it's interesting that it's two art teachers talking about mindfulness. Well, I mean, in the sense that as you get, you know, when we think about art for kids, we're thinking about teaching them how to make art. But as you become an adult, it's more about consuming art and making it a part of your life. And it's very difficult to truly appreciate art, whether it's music or a painting or a book, literature or film, if you don't put the phone down and actually engage yourself in the moment while you're trying to consume the art. So I think it's a great, you know, you wouldn't necessarily initially make that connection, but when you think about it, it's clear that that's where it's a good connection. So I think that's great.
Yeah, because they're flow activities
Right.
that require concentration and investment, and that you can kind of lose yourself in.
Thank you.
You should go watch the video too. The video with the Anderson Coopers.
It's really good.
It's a good video. Really opens your mind to it.
And I want to introduce Michelle, who's going to speak next.
My little talk isn't quite as fun as the last.
It's just as good.
All right. Isn't that fun?
The demo.
The demo.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So, I'm Michelle Hirth, and I am a special education teacher at the high school, and I am also a transition specialist, which means that I work with students while they're in high school, ages 14 to 22. So I also work with students who are in that 18 to 22 age group. This professional development seminar I helped arrange. Susan Woods is a colleague of mine that I've worked with over the last 10 years, and she is the retired Associate Dean of, what's her actual title? Dean of Student Support Services at Middlesex Community College. She also teaches currently at Middlesex in special education, and she works as a consultant now. So I've known her for years, and I thought she would be a great person to have come in and speak to our department as we work with students while they're here at Littleton High School, but looking forward to their next steps, which are a variety of things, including college. So she presented to our special education team, our out-of-district coordinator, our SLP was there, and we had a wonderful group of special education teaching assistants in the meeting as well. So she organized her presentation into 4 main ideas. The first is about law and how law drives special education, both in the public school environment as well as beyond in post-secondary education and in the community, but they differ greatly. We didn't dive too deep into IDEA versus the ADA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, but we did talk about how those differences affect the crucial differences between high school accommodations and what students and modifications and what students can apply to receive in college. The second section that she went through was the who does what when. And this is really, you really start to get to the nuts and bolts of the differences between high school and college when it comes to when it comes to education and accommodations. And the big takeaway there is that in high school and middle school and prior, there's a team approach, and the parents and the special education teachers are critical to that team, as well as the student, right? But when the shift goes into college, that team takes a second or sort of in the background. They may participate in the student's life, of course, but it's the student that drives the show. So there's a really huge shift in who is the sort of activator of that student's educational needs. So that, and then there was the when, and the when is when to apply for accommodations. So this, it's new. We are in a transition period when our students leave us in June and walk across the stage, and then they go to college that September. There's this middle ground where we're sort of finished and college hasn't really started, and some things take place there, including applying for and receiving accommodations at the college level that occurs. So there's an education that we can provide as special education teachers for the students and their families. The third were the actual accommodations and services, and that varies greatly. So whereas we can make modifications on an IEP, in college there are no modifications. There are accommodations. Students can take can apply to take extra time to finish an exam. They can apply to have an accommodation of a separate setting, which is something we do often. But there are no reduced amount of work. The content remains the same in college. The degree you get, the Bachelor's of Arts, the Bachelor of Science, is that, no matter what. So that's a big difference and something that we need to consider. And then the fourth section that Susan went over is how do we prepare our students? And that was probably the biggest takeaway for the team that we had sitting around the table, is what do we do? How do we approach this to be better at our job? And that students must be able to identify and understand what their disability is. And that sounds obvious, but it's not always there. So that's a big task we have in front of us. And the second thing is that students' absolute critical need to express what accommodations are helpful and why they need them to succeed. Because those are questions that once they reach college, those will be asked to them, not their parents, not their special ed high school teacher, or whatever. And they need to be able to explain that in order to get the accommodations that they need. So that's really what we talked about in a nutshell. It's not a happy, it was a lot of work. And I think the big takeaway from teachers is how can we shift the onus being on the team and the special educators and the parents to the individual as they grow and develop and go off to college. So there you go. All right, any questions? Questions? Yeah, I had to. I was
It's not a question,
that.
actually. It's more of a comment. So I've heard the term and I apologize if I get them wrong here, moving towards self-advocacy.
Yes.
Which is a critical
Correct.
piece there, and that transition, particularly during that gap. But do we also, I mean, because a part of it, a big part is also for the parents in terms of how to help that
Yeah.
shift there. But also as it relates to going on to college and pieces there, are we also helping them with what kinds of questions they might want to be posing to the schools that they're doing and what kind of environments that they have?
Yeah.
That might help that transition.
So that's a great question, comment. And I think in what I would love to see continue to develop is a partnership with our guidance department and parents. And when do we do this? I mean, is it really the right time to talk about it at IEP meetings, or do we have some sort of special time where we can impart that information? So I do think that's a really big topic out there. Susan also talked about having that hard conversation sometimes about really like what students, what they might need in order to succeed in college, and what type of college or what support services are out there and they're all different, you know, some are better than others, and make that sort of list of pros and cons and those questions that you need to ask, because you know, where your sister went or where your mom went to school might not be the best fit in terms of development. Yeah, but that's sort of the next
Because I want to let you
conversation.
know that this is an interesting topic.
Yeah, oh,
and
thank you.
I appreciate what you're doing
Good.
in this area.
Great, yeah, thank you very much. All right, and next is Liz.
Hello. Thank you for having us tonight, and thank you for your interest in our professional development. I am here, I'm going to go to the next slide to show you about 4 Littleton World Language teachers who spent the good part of a week last summer learning about teaching for proficiency at MAFLA's Proficiency Academy at Westfield State College. So 3 of us, Margot Gillen, Carolina Gonzalez, and I attended the Foundations of Proficiency course, and Janine Allison enrolled in Principles of Proficiency, Advanced Curriculum and Lesson Design, as this was her second Proficiency Academy. So I'm talking about a summer program as opposed to some of the other things you've heard here. As you've heard me say before, the field of world languages is currently bustling with pedagogical change as schools are moving towards the proficiency model of instruction. And in case you forgot what proficiency is, I put a meme up here, which is very appropriate as it was meme day today at the high school, so which is the speaking in a foreign language and the other person understands, and yes, you got it. That's what proficiency is. At a meeting last fall, a year ago, of the group MFLA, which is the Eastern Massachusetts World Language Administrators, we do love our acronyms, a department head from Duxbury Public Schools insisted that any school implementing proficiency start with the MAFLA Proficiency Academy, so we heeded her call. Each day for us started early and ended late, but I will say the food was very good. 2 of the most important segments of the daily schedule at Westfield were the Path to Proficiency presentations from schools who have already moved to this model of instruction. So they talked about the things that they did in their departments and at their schools and how they were moving towards proficiency. The second great part of the day was an afternoon breakout session. We had one each day in smaller groups because these were big groups in the morning. And these smaller groups were with teachers either in the same district, so all the Littleton teachers got to work together, and there were also some same language teachers in the group. So at these afternoon breakout sessions, topics were suggested to us, but we were also given free rein to really work on whatever we needed to work on. We had goals, and we got to work out details to bring back to our schools. So some of the things we talked about were actually setting goals for ourselves to meet throughout the year, developing grading practices as departments, and even sharing rubrics with other schools. So the leader of the academy, Greg Duncan, explained the following, that all highly effective language programs do 3 things. Number one, set proficiency targets for each level, and you can actually see those in the top of the slide with the ice cream cones. Design instructional pathways to meet these targets, and again, you can still sort of use the cones there. As you add on to your ice cream cone, it gets more advanced, it gets more complicated, it gets better, more delicious. And the last thing is that we need to assess internally and externally to see if our targets are being met. Again, if we want to be a highly effective language program. So some of the changes we've made as a result of this Summer Proficiency Academy to our instruction and curriculum model are we've been implementing grading based on the proficiency model and utilizing assessments in the categories of interpretive reading and speaking, interpersonal speaking, and presentational speaking. And writing, excuse me. We've been incorporating free choice reading into our daily agenda, which is actually complementing quite nicely an English teacher right now who's doing daily in-class reading. And this is a picture of some students doing daily reading in Spanish. This is, not all the teachers are doing this yet, but many of us are, 5 to 10 minutes per day with novellas, with children's books, with really anything that the students want to, it's their choice. And that has been, had a lot of really good positive feedback. We have been referencing as daily objectives the can-do statements of ACTFL. That's our American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages group. That's where we get these proficiency models and levels. And we've been actually teaching students about proficiency as well, explaining to them what it means. Again, we've got the meme there, but also how mistakes are okay when they do not impede with communication. So that is a real shift. We're also we're trying to educate parents a bit about this as well. And lastly, we all have these ice cream scoops in our classrooms so that we can reference them on a daily basis to talk about leveling up, which would be always talking about improving, trying to move up to the next level. And again, that may include mistakes, but that's okay. The last two things, we've been adding daily group or pair work in class to reinforce interpersonal skills and also help students process information. And we have been moving our attention in all of our instructional methods towards communication and away from, but not eliminating, grammar instruction. We still have a lot of work to do. Next on our agenda is to consider renaming our levels of language study based on proficiency levels, again, as advocated by Greg Duncan. For example, this would be something like renaming level 1 as our proficiency goal, which is novice high. This picture is from my classroom, and we went through each class and sort of set as targets where we thought we might like to be at the end of the year. So Latin 1 is, you can't really see it, but there's a sticky note there on novice high for Latin 1. Our department has actually continued to train since July. Some of us, again, 3 of us, went to another workshop in August, which was more on instructional strategies for proficiency-based curriculum. And we also have an upcoming state conference in October that many of us are attending, 2 to 3 days, depending on who's going, which will continue the same topic. So we'd just like to say thank you for all your support in attending these workshops, meetings, and conferences. And I know that was very technical, but look at all the smiles up there as well. And ice cream. So I would be happy to answer any questions.
I may run out of steam by the time I get to the last one. And relative to language, I'll probably relate more towards the multiple computer languages that I can do versus
Okay,
these.
I'll
But
take
anyway,
it.
But it brings in is, you talked a little bit about where I was thinking about in terms of multidisciplinary, in terms of what's it mean to learn in a different language. You know, particularly like, you know, if we had a physics paper in French, which is a different kind of reading than the other, you know, I'm missing the right word in there, but for it, because, you know, it'd be just interesting in terms of what we might be thinking about in terms of, as we branch the language proficiency aspects into the other parts of the education curriculum there.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that, I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not sure if you're asking or commenting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the higher level of proficiency you have in a language, the more technical and specific you would become. So actually, we only have novice and intermediate because the seal of biliteracy goal is intermediate high. But the next level is advanced, and then there is distinguished, and then there is superior. And so one example of superior is can teach French philosophy at a French university. You know, so that would be, so that's extremely specific. So it does require a much higher level of proficiency, but again, it also has to do with what you're familiar with in your own knowledge base, yeah.
And it ties into a little bit in terms of, you know, sometimes I hear, you know, folks going overseas to, you know, to a college which may not, English may not be the native language of the classes
Yep.
there. And they're not, and it's across the spectrum of the academics, it's not just within, you know, the language proficiency aspect.
Right, so they're good, the higher they get, the faster their transition's going to be right into that area, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your support. Thanks. Okay, and next up is Dan, speaking of science. Dan Hogan.
Jen, you covered the questions on
If he
this one.
starts in French, that's gonna be awesome.
No way.
He's gonna speak Australian.
Well, that's true. I'm more likely to speak German, but that's because I spent 3 months in Austria when I was 20 years old, and I learnt more in 3 months immersed in the language than I did in 7 years learning French at high school.
Wow.
So this is a story a little bit about you've got to be careful about what you wish for. I've got to say that, you know, last February I was realizing that it had been nearly 50 years since I'd done my first coding as a freshman in high school in Australia. And I have been thinking for the past 10 years how strange it is that Littleton didn't have a computer science program. And I had heard from a young woman who I had met that she had been through this program called Project Lead the Way at high school. And I looked into it, and it looked to me like to be something I might be able to handle. The
Down arrow. The down arrow.
It's the down arrow? Okay. The challenges of setting up a computer science course at the high school, I mean, computer science majors typically don't enter teaching. They have other ways to make money. And on top of that, even if they are computer science majors, if they're in the classroom, their knowledge becomes outdated very quickly. A student cannot study the theory of coding, right? You've actually got to do it. And from my perception, project-based learning is the ideal way to learn computer science. If you go to a place like WPI, or even my son, who was a computer engineer at University of Illinois, pretty much everything they do is project-based, collaborative learning. Project Lead the Way has been in business. It's a not-for-profit. It's been around for about 20 years. I think they said that they've got over 140 schools in Massachusetts using their programs. They provide curricula for project-based learning in engineering, biological science, and computer science from K through 12. Effectively turnkey curricula, and they provide training. In fact, they require you take their training, which is what I'm here for, because that was my professional development. They're required training because otherwise we could not adopt their curriculum. Their curricula are all based on a 3-step process: activities which introduce students to skills they need for the final problem that they will be challenged with, projects used to practice the skills they learn, and problems solved to put their learning into practice. And this sequence is repeated 3 or 4 times each quarter. And so far this year, we've completed one sequence, and I've got to say I'm really excited about how the kids have reacted to this program. I mean, I've never had such a totally engaged group of students as I do with this particular program. It's, you know, it's something they really want to do. They really want to be there. They spend time on it. They basically, I have to walk around the room as a facilitator, not as a teacher, which is, I suppose, is sort of a little bit like the way I do things anyway, but even more so. Their computer science principles program is aligned with the AP exam. It's not just coding specific. It actually covers the entire breadth of computer science. It's like a survey of the field. We touch on things like cryptography, big data. We do GUIs with Python. We're into an awful lot of stuff, and the professional development to do this was, I've got to say, very draining. The core training cost $2,400. If a teacher leaves a district, they guarantee to retrain someone else if the teacher leaves within 3 years. So that seemed to be a reasonable thing to be looking for. There's a mandatory annual subscription for the curriculum. And what they do with that $2,000 is they're consistently redesigning the curriculum to include the latest technologies. So I will have to have an update training this coming summer for next year's curriculum, but that won't cost anything. So that gets over the problem of becoming stale with what it is you know and what it is you can teach, is that this curriculum is pretty much all online. It's delivered electronically. There are no textbooks. I realized I can only actually fit 16 students into my room, my large room, because each one of them has got to have their own monitor to be able to do their coding. It would not work if they just had a laptop. I discovered that myself over the summer. You really cannot do coding on a small screen. It really was the PD from hell. It was held at WPI at the end of July. It was 2 weeks, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. over 10 weekdays and 2 hours of daily homework, plus 18 hours of over the weekend catching up. Is it PD? Well, I'm not sure. The course can't be adopted without it.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like mandatory. Teachers do attain most of the DESE license requirements for digital literacy by attending this course, and the other 2 requirements are sort of soft requirements which can actually be earned while doing the teaching. So hopefully before the end of the year I should have my license in digital literacy as well. The other interesting thing was that most other teachers who were there were actually being paid by their schools to attend, which is again because they can't find somebody to take this position, right, of teaching this subject. Here's a list of what we did. I won't read it out. I'm sure I tried to highlight it by putting the little things in red. They gave us this at the end of the course to say, here, this is what you can give your superintendent.
Oh my goodness.
It's the only PD I've been to that UMass Lowell has been prepared to offer graduate credits for.
Wow.
That's
impressive.
So it was very, very tough, I've got to say. Very tough. Fortunately, there is another way to do it, and that's during the year. But I didn't know about that possibility. So our solutions were that with this Project Lead the Way thing, we can get current teachers to be trained to deliver computer science content. The curriculum is continuously updated to keep current with the field, and the curriculum is entirely centered around a project-based learning pedagogy. I've got to say, I was really impressed with the support I got from Dr. Harrington and Dr. Clenchy and Beth Steele, because I actually brought this whole concept up, I think in February, after the program of studies had been sort of published, and they still supported me to try to make this go forward. We have 15 students in the class this year, so almost a capacity for the room that I have. So it seems to be getting off to a good start. And that's it.
I'll give Jen first crack.
All right, fine. So what's the first project the students built this year then?
The first thing that they did was actually to introduce them to Scratch, but many of them had already done that at the middle school. What we're doing now is we're actually creating an Android app. So we're using MIT's App Inventor. The next project will actually be using GitHub, if you know what that is. It's a way of controlling versions of software, how developers really work together. So it's real in that sense. Fortunately, many of these companies actually offer education programs where it actually costs us nothing to use it. GitHub was bought by, was it Microsoft? For $6 billion recently. I mean, I didn't even know what GitHub was. The instructors reassured me that my students would be very impressed that I knew what GitHub was. And they were suitably impressed. So we're going to be doing coding in Python. We'll be coding basically a GUI. They have to come up with their own. The projects end up being, you come up with a product you're going to design, right? And they do it in teams. So the teams have to show basically that they're following agile development practice. They have to, have effectively Scrum, right? They do sprints, and then it's me getting on top of all of this as well, by the way.
So you're the project manager?
No, I'm not the project manager. I'm just, sort of at this point, still trying to, get all of this stuff straight in my head. I mean, the second week of the training wasn't so bad for me because I did a lot of simulations when I was doing my PhD, so I had a lot of code that I already knew. But, all of the object-oriented programming, all of that, totally new to me. But Code Academy provides the ability with Google Classroom for me to provide a free Code Academy training for them. So what we've been doing is we've been doing the PLTW stuff during the day, and I assign them basically each of the steps of the Code Academy Python course for homework. And they should be through that entire introductory course by end of October. So about 8 weeks. Yeah. Well, it helps to have motivated kids, And I think Beth wants to speak now.
Oh, we're not done with you yet.
You're not done with me?
I'm sure Daryl has.
Of course I'm going to have Actually, it's a comment. No, I really appreciate this because I've been looking for how we're planning on trying to introduce and upgrade our computer science offerings here. And I really liked what I've heard it's not just doing the mechanics of the language.
Right.
That's not where the value is. That's not the other parts of it there. I really like this approach of doing a project, getting the concepts through. Yeah, there's some mechanics on it, but the mechanics can always come without that other thought process and the structured program.
Right, I mean, learning to collaborate with another student is actually incredibly important, and they're judged on that. In fact, what happens is I send the other teams around to review each team's projects. So they're actually judging themselves.
Oh, peer review. They're not
Peer review.
judging each other. And you're the scrum master, making
I'm
sure
the
that-
scrum master and
that
there's
they
peer
get the
review.
wrong
Okay.
status
So
taken
I'll have to
properly.
get, I have to
They
get
got their storybooks
the lingo
right,
down.
and-
Yes, I have to,
and the
yeah,
other
yeah,
pieces
yeah.
there.
Product backlogs and all of that sort of stuff,
That's
right?
right.
So, anyway,
Thank you very much.
all right.
Dan, a couple of comments, Dan.
Oh, you're not off the stage.
You're almost off the stage.
Okay.
But, Dr. Hogan, I guess the first thing I'm going to say to you is thank you for taking one for the team. This has been a dream within our district, and particularly in our high school, for a number of years. And I know how busy you are. I also know how talented you are. And for you to do this is, it means a lot. It means a lot to me as a superintendent, and certainly means a lot to the students and the parents in this community. It was a hard undertaking, but no doubt in my mind you were up to the challenge. It just
I doubted myself quite a few times during that 2 weeks. I mean, when one of the kids who'd just come out of, doing a computer science course, within 2 hours came up with this game that was literally a full 10-pin bowling game. And I was still worrying about, well, what am I going to do, right? I mean, it was really quite tough.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah.
But you've hit on some of our core beliefs that we've been trying to move forward. Coding is something we've been working on through various avenues within our K-12 district. But we wanted to become more specialized. You know that I love the phrase project-based learning, and as a district we're moving forward, that what you do in your classes and this addition is going to add more meaning to what project-based learning is all about. So thank you very much for your dedication.
Yeah, the middle school has really done a great job, though. I mean, I was surprised at how much the kids knew to start with.
Well, that's great. That's good to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Hogan.
Thank you.
And for the rest of the presenters this evening, I'm just so proud of what you all have done in terms of professional development and what you are bringing back to your classrooms. I know it takes time and commitment, but we're just very well served with your talents in our schools. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would like to echo that as well. I think you can tell clearly by tonight that once you get teachers talking about something that they are really passionate about and they enjoy, we can talk for a very long time and we get really excited about it. It's really, it becomes like our jam and we love it. So thank you all for taking the PD, for facilitating the PD. It really demonstrates understanding that we're all learners and that we're continuing to better our craft. And additionally for prepping tonight's presentation, which is on top of everything else that they do. So thank you all very much for that. And so we have one more going backwards, who were not able to be here this evening. So you can see by this slide, Rebecca and Allison, who are both first grade teachers, and Amy, who's a second grade teacher, participated in a Childlight yoga course this summer. And they attended a 2-day training to become Childlight Yoga certified to teach ages 2 through 12. And during this training, they learned about the development of children and the connection to movement and the brain. They created yoga and mindfulness lesson plans and learned how to incorporate the practices of yoga and mindfulness into their community building within the classroom. And so you can see through the pictures that these three found the training to be very fun, but also, yeah. I don't know if that's possible. But also they found it really meaningful and useful when teaching all of their students. So don't be surprised when you see more yoga and mindfulness during your Twitter scroll this year. But also we're going to be very mindful of how long we're doing that Twitter scroll for, as Ms. Hosfeld pointed out during her PD that she facilitated. So you can see in the report that was given to you at the beginning of this meeting this evening, there's so many more conferences and workshops and courses that our teachers have taken. It's quite impressive, the array and the variety in which our teachers take within district, but then also what they go out and find within the community, the state, and even globally. And so to move on, I'd just like to speak a little bit about what the district provided last year. So as a district, we participated in 2 webinars with Marzano Resources that were facilitated by Kristen Pogue. During these webinars, teachers learned strategies that are found throughout the text, which is seen in the picture there, The New Art and Science of Teaching by Robert Marzano. After the webinars, teachers were able to take these strategies and implement them into their classrooms to create an engaging classroom environment. Additionally, last year, we were able to have Charity Bell visit us multiple times to speak with staff in the community. She emphasized that we're living in an extreme time and discussed how trauma-informed teaching is really critical. Our faculty really enjoyed listening to her dynamic presentations last year. Over the next 2 slides, you can see what our teachers are saying about the professional development. Again, you can see that Charity Bell was an impactful presenter for our teachers. Additionally, you can see the theme of teacher collaboration and working with and learning from fellow teachers. I think one of the quotes on this second slide sums up the PD experience well when one of our teachers said, "Classroom teachers are continually grateful for the opportunity to run and participate in faculty-led sessions. These professional development opportunities give us a chance to work together on deepening our knowledge of the curriculum and sharing how to best implement it to support all learners." This is truly why we love to be able to offer the faculty-led PD sessions to our staff. And so lastly, and now looking forward to this current school year, our tuition assistance program is well underway for this academic year. Again, this year, as seen in the PD calendar that was handed out to you at the beginning of this meeting, as well as the PD plan for the district for this year, we have 12 early release professional development sessions planned, during which our staff will participate in engaging and interactive professional learning that will focus around social emotional learning. We're using and working with 2 great organizations this year. The first is an organization called Pathways to Restorative Communities, while the second is called Rebus Associates. All staff receive the red book, as we've seen here before, titled Social Emotional Learning in the Classroom. One of the authors of that book is Jane Harden, and she will be coming to do workshops with our staff this year. Additionally, again this year, we're collaborating with Harvard Public Schools and the Air Shirley Regional School District for a full day of professional development. That day will take place on November 5th, and we are excited to be able to host that here in Littleton this year. We are really excited about the PD that we have planned for this year and look forward to seeing what the teachers generate during the faculty-led PD sessions this spring. I'd like to end the presentation this evening with a quote from one of our teachers who said, "Thank you to Littleton Public Schools for this incredible opportunity. Professional development is so important to our staff, and we really appreciate the continued support of the school committee and the community that allows us to provide and offer such great experiences for our staff." So thank you very much. Any questions for me?
I'd just like to
I'm glad I
comment,
spoke last.
I'd like to echo the comments that Superintendent Clench made and Beth made a minute ago. The school committee really appreciates and recognizes the amount of time and effort beyond the scope of what we would constitute a normal school day or a normal school week or month or year to get this incredible amount of work done. It helps that they're getting involved in stuff that clearly engenders a significant amount of enthusiasm.
Yep.
You know, Dr. Hogan was complaining, but I'm sure he was in his element.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably, like for him, that's a vacation, you know, maybe not for his wife. He was probably happier than anybody there that week. But it's still a big commitment, and we appreciate it. And the other thing is we've mentioned a couple times, this is why we have the half days built into the calendar. They are significant, they are meaningful, they are necessary, they are beneficial to everyone. And we know it can be a challenge to families and parents to work that, but it's worth it from a school committee's perspective, and to have you guys come and show us year after year helps reiterate to the community why we do it that way. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, next we have a vaping prevention presentation, very timely, something they talked about quite a bit, a lot going on in the state of Massachusetts regarding vaping.
Yes, good evening, and thanks for allowing us the opportunity to come before you and talk about a hot topic in the community across the country. Certainly in Massachusetts, with the recent announcement from our governor of a 4-month ban on the sale of vaping products online and in stores. We, like other schools, are certainly impacted, but it's a broader community issue. The Board of Health is engaged in the topic. They had a meeting, I believe, dedicated to this topic in the summer. I followed up with a presenter they had either arranged to bring in, or someone who attended the meeting followed up with me by email, and then we've had a few conversations. It's a presenter with a anti-tobacco initiative out of Boston or Quincy, and we're going to I'm going to talk to the superintendent, perhaps bring her forward at some point during the school year to talk to school committee and talk with a certain level of expertise on the topic. And she's also willing to come and talk to parents about it. So you'll be hearing more about that from an expert. Principals, unfortunately, high school principals, middle school principals, have had to get really up to speed on this topic. We've known about it, we've been talking about it, we know it's an issue for the last couple of years, but it seems to have taken on increased, it has certainly taken on increased concern. Our YRBS data that I'll sort of present to you in a minute has validated the concern in terms of the increased usage of students. We presented on the YRBS data from 2018 to you. I think it was at some point last winter or spring. We made a presentation about that. The YRBS survey will be coming out again to our students in March of 2020. We'll be taking our students will participate in the survey, so we should be able to start to see what kind of trends we're experiencing here in Littleton as well as in the surrounding community. So just to give, Steve, if you just would flick to the next one. I could do it right now here at this thing. All right, so vaping. The definition, this is from the YRBS survey that I mentioned earlier, involves the use of electronic cigarettes or a similar device to inhale tobacco, flavored nicotine, marijuana, other mixtures. And what they're in the recent news reports are saying there's different types of chemicals. It's not what adults or students sometimes, or young people are thinking they are inhaling. They're cancer-causing chemicals in many cases. It's not necessarily oils. Some of the substances are unknown. So in terms of the safety of the product, the safety is just not there, and hence the the state ban on it. And it was a unanimous decision by the Department of Public Health, the board that oversees that, to impose this ban to slow things down and get a handle on the issue. This is the slide that you saw in the YRBS presentation, and it has some trend data from the 2016 YRBS, and it does start in 6th grade. And you'll see that there's how it's increasing over time, and as the kids go along in age and grade level. You can see the changes from blue to the yellow there, where it's increased. And the total high school from 9th to 12th grade, students who have tried or experimented with vaping, from 12% to 28%. And 1/5 or 20% of youth surveyed in the total survey admitted to having vaped in the past 30 days. That's across the region of the survey. There's also a strong association between vaping and the use of other substances, which are highlighted there for you. This is we were able to put this together sort of at the last minute, collect this information. And what I'd like to do is I'll forward it on to the superintendent already has it, but he'll forward it for your reference. And this is a topic that's not going away. I just wanted to sort of give you an update tonight, as Jason will join me shortly, to give you a little update of what we're doing at the high school. So this is sort of my introduction to that. But this is a topic we'll have to come back to, no doubt. And I want you to have some frame of reference for the data, so we'll provide that. So you can consume it later. LHS YRBS results 2018. There's been a steady decline in students who have reported recent cigarette smoking, so that's the good news, right? However, the incidence of students who reported vaping has doubled over the last 2 years. 24% of LH students said that they have vaped in their lives. And 14% of students in the 9th grade reported that they had vaped in their lives. And then I already mentioned that the growth to 24%. And there's all kinds of information we've been sending out to parents via our weekly newsletters and updates, email updates. We're also going to have created a section on our webpage dedicated to education around vaping, and it's going to be getting more expensive as we get through the fall. to include all kinds of links and some video links as well for people who are interested in learn more about the topic. But get the facts, 1 vape pod equals 20 cigarettes. Other than tobacco products, Littleton High School students reported vaping flavored nicotine, marijuana, alcohol. I was surprised to see that, and other types of drugs. A minority of students use drugs, smoking, vaping to manage their stress. We talked a lot about last spring about our concern with students experiencing stress. That will be an important data point to collect in the March to see how, if students are using this as some type of coping mechanism or to reduce anxiety. Nicotine can harm your brain, including your memory and ability to learn. That's part of the fact presentation from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. I think this is well known, but it's getting students to understand the impact of advertising and misleading messages sometimes provided by the corporations behind it. And they are being targeted, no question about it. It is addictive. The criticism of it from advocates or activists against vaping is that it's very reminiscent of what happened with big tobacco in terms of the marketing to young people and getting them hooked at young ages with misleading information about it not being as bad as it is. I just wanted to give you some data. Daryl had asked a very specific question about like where we're at the last meeting or at the high school. I wanted to give you a little update on incidents at the high school. 2016, 2017, the assistant principal, Keith Camo, and I had been hearing about it at other schools. We didn't have any actual kids caught in possession with vapes, things, we knew that there were students involved in it outside of school just from hearing stories. Even we had heard rumors about it happening in the school, but no students had been caught. Maybe it was perhaps due to increased, surveillance of the situation or awareness around the issue. We had our SRO made a presentation to faculty about it. We provided examples of what they look like. Some of them are very reminiscent to very small USB devices that can, some kids were reported as having them in classes just attached to their devices. They were charging their vape on devices. We had heard all kinds of stories from the police and local school administrators who were some schools had been really impacted much earlier than us. But we had just because we reported 6 incidents, that we had probably way more than that, of course, with kids walking around possession of them or even using in the building. But we had 6 incidents, and that gave you the breakdown there. Our consequence at the time and up till present really has been 2 days of out-of-school suspension, along with meeting with the parents, that kind of thing. What we're looking to do is make a handbook change. We really want to get to more of a cessation model or educational program for students, perhaps on a Saturday after school. We're designing that. You'll be hearing an update about that for a suggestion. We're going to enact that right away, though. We want to get away from depending on how egregious the offense is, there's still a possibility of suspension, but we really want to add the educational component here. It was when I was an assistant principal, and I can recall now, over 15, almost 20 years ago, we had a program that was enacted at the school I was at the time related to tobacco cessation. It was very effective. Students had to attend a Saturday school with a health teacher for 2 hours, participate in the program. It was mandatory as part of a consequence of being caught smoking in the restroom or in possession of cigarettes. And there were all kinds of other things done to help a student who might be getting hooked on cigarettes at the time. So more schools are, as part of the restorative approach to discipline today, it's particularly popular, and you'll be hearing more about that as practices throughout the whole school district. We really want to focus more on the educational piece and less on the punitive side where we send kids home and they're going to go vape at home. But we do know there are reports in the media of students, and I've heard about it from other schools and even from kids saying that sometimes kids could be walking down the hall or in a classroom and they're vaping and you don't even know it. So it's moved from the bathrooms where it was first really well known to the classroom and to just the common areas. If you walk around Littleton High School, though, it's not obvious. It's not something it's not a something that, wow, the kids are vaping everywhere. I don't want to give that image at all. This is a public health issue that we're concerned about, and we want to make sure we're keeping it out of school, away from the school campus, off of school grounds. But as I walk around the halls, and I'm quite visible and out and about all the time, I don't see kids walking around with this, but I hear that they can be very, they can be deceptive in how they carry it out. And we're trying to be more aware of that.
So, I know typically we wait to the end, but
Yeah.
it's sort of come more topical as you're right here.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about, you know, handbook changes and the other pieces there, you know, part of what strikes me is, you know, perhaps just moving away from the disciplinary aspect of it altogether there, in terms of, you know, I feel there's a need to focus on the discouragement, and, you know, it's, even if it's just simple there's no actual disciplinary action associated with it, but it's merely taking it away and requiring an adult signature before they can get it back.
Mhm.
You know, just setting some things here in place that there's a health issue associated
Sure.
with this. We
We
do
don't-
eventually need to deal with the disciplinary aspects of it.
Sure. We don't return it to the students. They're underage, not supposed to be in possession.
Right,
So-
but you know,
yeah.
but again, it sets it, because the other part I get concerned about is, you know, and you can see it, you know, in a workplace that's banned smoking over time, you know, the nicotine and
Goes
the
on the
other
ground.
parts of it there drive other behaviors, which are really, in my mind, some of the pieces that, once we start trying to get some level of reduction of it happening there, as well as the education about the impacts and the other pieces there, it seems to me other supports other than discipline are going to be necessary for that. And I'd like us to just be thinking in that broader
I
context.
agree completely.
When as we're talking about it, what I'm thinking about, and what I think I hear Dr. Harrington saying is, if it's accompanied by other types of poor behavior, like open defiance towards the administration or something along those lines, then the vaping really is just a symptom of the underlying behavioral problem. It could have been something else. It could have been defacing a bathroom wall. It could have been, could have been any number of things. That's what needs to get dealt with more on a punishment basis, because
Right.
we simply can't have kids thinking or families thinking that there are no consequences for being openly defiant in creating a negative atmosphere in the school that negatively impacts other students. That's
It also depends on the content of the vape. That's a mitigating circumstance.
exactly,
We keep that in mind. So, you know, if it was marijuana or something, other type of chemical, that would be a real serious concern. And also distribution issues.
Right.
Similar to how we've handled marijuana in the past. You know, it's one thing to be in possession of a little bit of weed, and it's another thing to be a distributor in the building. So we'll keep that in mind, but we are with you completely, and you'll see that in a few more slides. What we're looking to do is really, although our handbook allows for suspension, what we're looking to do, we have that discretion, and we're grateful to have that discretion to be able to read situations and apply consequence. We really want to enact right away, effective immediately this year, an educational program for the student, but something that's mandatory for them, because they won't do it unless we mandate it, that they learn about the dangers of vaping, that kind of thing. So we're with you completely.
Yeah, I apologize for not letting you go through
Yep.
the whole thing there, but as you were talking about, you know, it just struck me as there's still too much of a punitive.
Well, it's true.
piece in
And if you look
discussion
at
there.
consequences, we did a survey in the Midwatch League about 26 schools about a year ago. Schools were all over the place on how they enforced vaping. Some 5 days out of school suspension, believe it or not. Some were very strict. Those schools that were really out there with their suspensions have brought the days in. More and more schools. There was a recent article I'll be sharing with the staff from the Lynn Public Schools, and some of the big urbans have been really consumed with this issue. They've just totally wiped away suspension and have mandatory educational programs in place. So we're looking at all the different options. We want to sort of have a variety of things we can choose from, depending on the situation. But we're going to always lean in the direction of being educational, since that's at the heart of our mission, and understanding the addictive nature of this. The kids are hooked, or getting hooked on it. So at this point, I'm going to invite Jason to come up and talk a little bit about the middle school. I will come, Jason, you have a slide that goes back to the actual school committee packet. And you might want to, it's not necessary? I can bring it up for you, Jason.
I can bring it up.
No, I mean, they can read it on their own. I can do it from my head.
Go back
Hey-
to the.
here you go,
back to
Jason.
the, package.
This is your piece here.
Just a comment, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. Chairman Fontanella brought up a good point. I mean, there are multiple variables that are involved when we're dealing with these situations. We have made a commitment to take an approach of education and prevention, but I don't want anybody here feeling that consequences may not be in place if necessary. I mean, our preference is to not administer consequences, but very seldom do we have a situation where there's only one variable. So
Yes,
let's keep that in mind.
I'm just asking that we talk about it as the scale of escalation of it.
Right.
Because I don't want to walk away from a meeting going, well, we have 2-day suspension for being caught vaping. It's not where I think we want to be, and so I would like to make sure our language is leads with that rather than ends with that.
Right, well, we're proposing language to you for that adjustment.
Okay. And to what Kelly said, there always should be consequences. It just doesn't always have to be punitive.
Right. Yeah, as a district, we try not to be punitive.
Yeah.
There are consequences, and in this case, if a student ends up going to a Saturday session to learn more about vaping, that is a consequence, but it's proactive to a certain degree, somewhat reactive, but the intent is to help the student acknowledge that this isn't a good thing to continue.
The vaping landscape at the middle school is a little different, just because of the nature of the age range that we're talking about. We have very young 6th graders for whom they know nothing, and the family knows very little about vaping and e-cigarettes, to 8th graders who are very ready to experiment. And so how do you, in a single school, address that topic without having to overexpose some students and underserve some others? And so we, last year, our health teacher, Trish Bonacore, really took the lead on this, recognizing that this was something that was not going to go away, something that was exploding in front of our very eyes. She had approached me last year about wanting to implement an anti-vaping curriculum into the health program specifically for 8th grade. So much so that she wanted it as a part of her evaluation process, where her evaluation goals, her personal professional development goals would be a part of it. And so what she did is she began to research those programs that were out there that were kid-friendly, middle school-friendly, accessible, but also the professional development that she would need to be able to offer that curriculum from a place of expertise rather than just staying one step ahead of the kids. And so she began her professional development to gather that technical data, to gather that usage data, and settled on something called Catch My Breath, which is in conjunction with the University of Texas. And it's really about anti-vaping for the middle school model, to really talk about the long-term harmful effects, the short-term effects, how e-cigarettes work, how juuling works, what are the chemicals that are involved, and really trying to discuss with the 8th graders before they begin to experiment, if you are pressured to do this, here's what you're going to be taking into your body. Here are the effects that are going to happen. It also works on the media influences. It works on the peer pressure influences. So it's not just simply around the chemical or the physiology of it, but also the social part of how do you say no to somebody when your friends are vaping or juuling? How can you effectively say no and still be able to save face? And so this program has been very successful, so much though that she would like to expand it to our 7th graders this year with a slightly different version, so that we're casting a wider net and being able to adjust that curriculum as she sees fit. She also worked with Littleton Police Department with the Project Alert program, in which Littleton PD officers came in and discussed the dangers of all kinds of substance abuse. And so what we've really done is had a two-pronged approach with our 7th and 8th grade students around all kinds of things that they may take into their body, but we're really honing it in as they get older around the vaping as it becomes more and more prolific. And so what we're looking at this year is an expanded program into the 7th and 8th grade, really trying to target the education part of it and try to maybe put a stop to some of this stuff before kids begin to experiment. To be honest, we haven't had an instance of vaping that we know of at the middle school, and that's only true until it's not true. And so we can work to prevent things, and maybe begin a stopgap portion of that. And for, a 12 or 13-year-old that ends up with one of these devices, it's a whole different set of circumstances than a 17 or 18-year-old who came by it. And so we have to ask very different questions about how students, become in possession of these things. And so the trials that we face at the middle school might be different at the high school, but I think our approaches are similar in terms of education and prevention as really the way to sort of get out ahead of this thing.
Let's go back. Thanks, Jason. One interesting comment from one of our biology teachers. She was having a discussion with students about, the impact of it on the body and mind. And one of the students and they were talking about how what could the high school do, and if one of the students replied to her and said, well, if you're waiting to high school, you're too late. And she's meaning that we have to really look from I would say even in 5th grade at Russell Street, really looking at the health curriculum there all the way up to grade 12. So a holistic approach of how we're doing, staging this, that we're on message and having some type of communication. Not introducing them to it necessarily, since it's in the public media, they know about it, but kind of taking away any mystery around it and any false information, especially when it comes, obviously the educational curriculum component needs to be grade and age appropriate and adjusted, just like we do with a lot of our curriculum. But I think, something 5, 6, 7, 8 on message. They get up to high school, they've heard it all. That was certainly effective with tobacco education. The anti-tobacco curriculum, I think it starts a lot younger than grade 5 now, just from what I can see, what I remember from my own son. But it's especially important in middle school. So just a couple of slides, and these are things that parents will be able to access on our website. I'll be putting the presentation up there along with all kinds of additional information for your review, but also for the general public. I want to just go back to where I left off here, just a second. Talked about the YRBS data and the incidents. Prevention and intervention. We're scheduled, as I mentioned in my opening, that we're scheduled a presentation by a health professional to address substance abuse in general, but also vaping, or as Jason, it's commonly known as among the kids, juuling, specifically, and the effect this has on neurological development during adolescence and over time. LHS did, similar to the middle school, integrated elements of the Catch My Breath anti-vaping curriculum into the health course. Meredith Perry, who's presented to you before, is our curriculum coordinator, pre-K to 12 for health and wellness. I've asked her to come present to you at some point, give you an update on what we're doing with our curriculum specifically to address anti-vaping. The nurse, our school nurse, Chris Perrell, is also willing to come forward to the school committee, give an update from her perspective on the impact. And we've talked to other members of the wellness committee, and we want to engage the Board of Health on this. We really I think it's more than a discipline. The superintendent had a good conversation about this last week. It's not just a disciplinary issue. It's not just a school issue around education and the curriculum. It's a comprehensive, as a town, community, we really need a comprehensive approach to how we address this serious concern with vaping and the chemicals that students are inhaling. So we'll go to the next slide there. So next slide is, these are all, this is a video, a 15-second video. I don't know if you could play it from there, Steve, or if you want me to skip that.
You want to watch it?
It's 15 seconds, go ahead. I don't know if we'll play, it might be unavailable from the link.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right, but this is something we'll make available to parents and the community on our website. It just captures some of the next slide. It captures vapes and cigarettes, different products, same dangers. That's an expression they're using. It talks about the breakdown. It's very visual, so I wanted to provide this for you tonight. This is from a PowerPoint that we're granted permission to use from an anti-tobacco coalition. The next page, next slide. Vaping can harm your brain and the rest of your body. It's not water vapor. Aerosol from vaping is cancer-causing chemicals. So they come up with some really nice visuals, but they've also provided a lot of information for parents who frequently ask questions that teachers have about it. These are the frequently asked questions about vaping. What is it? What's an e-cigarette? what can I do to prevent my child from vaping? How can I tell if my child is vaping? What if my child is vaping? How can I help him or her quit? So you can see the strong emphasis on the educational component and the support to understand it and try to properly intervene. Some pictures kind of capture, these pictures capture some images of different types of jewels and vapes. It can be used to vape other substances, though, as I've mentioned. You know, certainly with the legalization of marijuana, these have become, in Massachusetts for adults, these have become more popular. I believe it was maybe a year and a half ago, Massachusetts raised the age for tobacco sales from 18 to 21, right? Tips for talking with your kids about vaping. This is information we're going to be sending out. And I think both Jason and I will share this with our parent communities. Future plans for prevention and intervention, so getting right to it. We're going to engage with the Wellness Committee and the Board of Health. We'd like to have presentations to students, faculty, and parents, as well as the school committee about this from health professionals who are the experts on it. And we're getting up to speed on it, but we're certainly on the front lines of it, but there's other folks who know more of the science behind it and the significant dangers of it to bodily well-being. Student leadership, that's something I think is really important. We've seen it's been effective with anti-tobacco initiatives to engage students in educating their peers about health, wellness, and anti-vaping. We're also going to have continual monitoring and supervision, to some degree increased, where we can, of the campus hall spaces and parking lots. A lot of our students drive, unlike the middle school, and their cars are not lockers. Some of them might treat it that way during the day, but we've noticed over the last couple of years more and more students going out to the parking lot to retrieve a book or get this or that. And we're kind of wondering about that. We want to increase our supervision of that. Updates to student handbook with the cessation program. We want to host a health and wellness fair at some point. We're going to survey students again. I mentioned this before in March as part of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and it has specific questions related to vaping. I already mentioned, that's a dupe there, monitoring supervision of halls, parking lots. And review of related curriculum instruction materials for grades 5 to 12 is what my recommendation would be, to really start looking at grade 5. But we'll be working with Beth Steele on that too, as well as Cheryl Temple at Russell Street. And continue to educate students about the influence of vape advertising. Meredith Perry does a great job with that in the health courses at the high school. Continue to share educational links with parents and community and newsletters and on websites. I've been doing this for well over a year about vaping. I've been sharing different links for parents who want to get educated about it. And just to give you a few, there they are. There's a lot. These are just different articles I've come across, and a lot of them are very recent, related to vaping and the serious concerns our country has with it. So, you've heard the recent reports about all the vaping illnesses that are, and they weren't sure exactly of the causality, what's exactly causing it, what's happening. There's a concern that deaths are now attributed to vaping and that kind of thing. So we really want to educate, get the word out, share information, and have a really comprehensive community-wide approach to dealing with the very important issue. Thank you for your time listening. I'm happy to wrap it up with any questions or any directions for follow-up that you'd like to see.
Just a comment. A few years ago, I was having a conversation with Chief King and about tobacco use and vaping, and we decided to bring in some expertise. So the police department and our leadership team had some training and identification of various new tobacco products and vaping machines and pods, etc. That presentation then was done again with the high school staff. And back then, it was imperative that educators began to had a better understanding of what vaping was. They're disguised as discs that you put in your computer. You can actually charge them in your computer. And we just wanted to make sure that we were up to speed. We really felt that we were outdated at that time. So we started this process a few years ago, but vaping took off much faster than I think most people thought. It was supposed to be a smoking cessation product, and it mushroomed into something else. Yeah, I know, that's what it was first pushed as. A recent study, 2019, actually really targeted the increase in vaping amongst teenagers. It was really interesting in that article, it was in the grade 8 year, it actually doubled. The use doubled in 1 year. So, targeting middle school is very important in terms of ways of helping students get better educated in prevention strategies. So,
Thank you.
So this topic, I think our district was probably about 6 months to a year ahead of MASC and the state in terms of updating our tobacco policy for vaping here. So it's been something, I can see the parallels, in terms of the tobacco. You could pull your commercials from the 50s and 60s on tobacco, and you look at how they're targeting the vaping. It's there. I feel very strongly that these unknown chemicals that anybody can make a vaping product. There's no regulation around it and stuff. So I already saw the writing on the wall that this was a disaster. I do appreciate you taking the measured steps of making sure that we have the correct curriculum and other pieces there for it. And hence my desire to keep pushing it faster, that we're actively on top of it. But I do appreciate the properly measured responses that we have to do as a school district there. But I'll probably continue to push that that we need to get ahead of it and not just react to it there. And it's already probably too late. It's definitely already too late for our high schoolers at this point there. So
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
No, I think this is really important, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it, so I really appreciate the focus on it.
Yeah.
And, like Daryl said, we've got to keep ahead.
Yeah, we'll send along the presentation. It'll be posted on the website for the public to see. And I'll talk to the superintendent and see what would be a convenient time for us to arrange a follow-up presentation with some experts and health professionals. I think that would be the next
would that be something that the school committee would be interested in?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And I just want to make one comment in the sense that I appreciate what Kelly said, that he and Chief King 2 years ago were already talking about this, and Dr. Harrington referred to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is not a new topic for the school department. Youth risk behavior in general is ingrained in managing youth risk behaviors across the spectrum, is ingrained into our health curriculum and has been for years. It's a continued point of emphasis for the administration, and it's something that's presented to the school committee on a regular basis. The issue is that vaping has gotten out in front. It's become a public health crisis. It's not a Littleton health crisis. It's not a Littleton high school health crisis. It is not a Massachusetts health crisis. It is a health crisis across the country. And Daryl, I appreciate you being honest about it. We have lost the battle along with everybody else.
Yep.
For at least for the short term.
Singling us out.
Right, exactly. At least for the short term. So we definitely need to continue to step up our efforts, but that's what we're doing. We're accelerating things that were already being done. We're just being more aggressive, and we need to probably be even more aggressive. And so in terms of having more presentations and more education, absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
I just wanted to maybe just tag one other part on it, because I expect, and I think we're already seeing, we're going to see the industry pushing back.
It's underway
now. We've already saw the language from the CDC that soften up, because they're now going, well, we got to get all the studies. We can't wait for all those studies, then decide to do something. I'd rather be ahead of that and then say, oh, we were a little too restrictive, and then loosen up if it becomes not as serious.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to wait for the industry battle that's going to happen in the courts and everything else, and us feel that we have to not do something until that plays out.
I think we're all the same. Thank you so much. All right, thank you, John. All right, next on presentation is a financial update.
Yep, so there's 2 reports in the school committee packet. So this is the FY19 final budget report, and then the second page is the final FY19, so last year, revolving fund balances. We obviously have a little bit of work to do in the appropriated budget with balancing and redistributing the funds across the cost centers at this point in time. We'll work on that for the FY20 budget. And again, the revolving fund balances, if I scroll down, you can see those. You can see where we are with school choice and circuit breaker funds. School choice, we actually ended up a little higher than our targeted number and our forecasted number when we did the budget. And then the other revolving funds, you can see those balances as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions or come back at a later school committee with additional information.
Questions or comments?
Just a comment. When we reflect upon last year, Steve and I were very concerned about the number of staff that we had out on maternity leave, long-term leaves. So we tightened up our budget to try to ensure that we didn't have to dip into additional revolving funds. We were successful. In fact, we were more successful than we thought. So that's why our school choice balance is the way it is. We're actually really in good shape. The cards just fell into place for us. But something that we continue to be concerned about is the increase in the number of staff that are taking long-term leaves for various reasons. Maternity is the major reason, but we have other health factors that come into play as well. So we're watching that again this year.
I thought I had a question, but I misread the number, so I don't. I just want to say, only from a budget planning perspective, those concerns.
So if you have questions later, just email me and I'll be more than glad to answer them. So.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Clinch, you wanted a short presentation on accountability.
Yeah, thank you.
Measurements.
Last week, Friday it was, I sent the school committee an email when I was notified that our accountability rating had changed. It took us a while to dig into the data because accountability is encompassing many different factors. It's certainly not just academics. Generally, that's what people think about. They think about MCAS exams and that's it. But there are many other criteria that are involved in determining one's accountability status, graduation rates. In this case, participation rates would be the premise of the discussion. We were cited this year for our participation rate for our Latino Hispanic subgroup. This is the first time in the history of Littleton School District that we had a population that was 20 or over. And please remember, if it's 20, one student is 5%. The participation rate established by ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, is 95%. How a state deals with participation rate is not dictated by the Federal Department of Education. It's a state decision, so I wanted to emphasize that as well. So what does this mean? It means that we have a classification that is specific to targeted support for the participation rate for our Hispanic Latino subgroup. That was it. That was enough to change our rating. So everything else was fine. We've actually verified that with the Department of Education twice. We've had 2 phone calls, actually 3 phone calls with them, as we were sifting through the data and trying to make sense. Because when we trace back, one has to, this is getting technical, but if you didn't have 20 students in a subgroup population, we don't have data because they don't give us data on it. So we had to go back and try to get the data just to see where we were a couple of years ago and last year. So when we were digging into the data, we found out that we have, again, 22 students that are categorized as Latino or Hispanic. 1 student who is not in our district schools, but is in another school outside of our district, was cited for not participating in the MCAS administration. What was interesting about this, as we continued to dig down, I'm going to use the word deeper down, we found out that although this student, we really don't have any agency with this student. The school he's at administers their MCAS exams themselves. But the student wrote all 3 MCAS exams. But the regulations in this state are clear that for each of the 3 subjects that are tested, the student has to have 1 sitting of the MCAS exam in each subject area during the spring administration. This student wrote these exams at other times of the year, so it was more of a retest format for some reason. So it's not as if the other school didn't have this student write MCAS exams. It was the time of year that they were written. A little bothersome to me that in itself would bring us to a targeted need for intervention in Hispanic Latino subgroup. But rest assured, we have appealed the decision and we're awaiting their reply. There was one more piece of information, and I tried to give you as much as I could without being too long-winded. We had a student move into our district in 2019. The administration always meets with new students, and when asked about MCAS administration, they were told, and I believe the parents were present as well, that he's all set, that the student is all set. So administration didn't think anything of it, and you have to remember it's not easy to find this information if a student isn't ours, because it takes a while to process through the system. So if you really look at that table that I sent you, in the science exam, it was 2 students. It was 1 student in the ELA and math. So that resulted more correctly in our participation rate being 94%, and we needed a 95% cutoff. So I guess I have a few other things written down I was going to refer to. I think I've covered most of them here. Our appeal is based solely on the fact that as a district, we do not have agency over that high school. In other words, we have no authority over that high school. So for that student to be put in with our data, I mean, do what they want, but the bottom line is, in order for us to entertain any type of corrective action, we need to have authority to do so. So that's the basis of our appeal, and we'll see where we go from there. It was interesting, John, Beth, and I were at a DESE workshop on Edwin Analytics today and vocal survey. And after I got the hang of what Edwin Analytics was, I've used it before, I decided to explore and see if I could find the 1 student in our database. And after a half hour of applying various filters, I still was not able to locate this particular student in our database. So another concern I have is, how can we be preventative if we don't have access? And maybe there's something out there I don't know about. We're going to converse back and forth and try to figure out, is there a way we can get a list? I mean, after the fact, we can download a list, but we need something before this happens. Any questions on that update?
Jen?
No. My question is, I guess, just with the appeal process, and if that doesn't work, what is the exact remedy, right? If we're...
I'm really interested in that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't know what I mean, we're gonna try to figure out a way, but I'm gonna rely on them as well to say,
Right,
okay,
okay.
how could we possibly prevent this from happening? And I guess you also have to remember that MCAS test writing is not mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's only mandatory in high school because it's a graduation requirement. So you have that factor in this 95% participation rate. I mean, we've done really well in making sure we've attained close to 100% in all our subgroups. Just again this year, I'm going to make the statement, for things that were out of our control, we weren't able to. If we would have known about it or had agency, and I emphasize the word agency, this would not have happened.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the readout here. You know, when I first read your email back to us on this situation here, you know, I sort of see it as two different pieces relative to us as school committee here. One, do we have the programs in place so that when we're looking at true aggregates of students, that we're properly supporting them as major subgroups there? And quite frankly, once we get down to these 10s and 20s population there, the percentages don't mean anything because those are individual students. When we look at, you know, the whole, you know, our whole ELL population, there might be a larger subgroup there. The percentages means whether we're supporting them or not. So I walked away understanding that we are supporting our subgroups properly at the policy and support level there. I get concerned. I appreciate you doing the due diligence on your part about the individuals there. But the school committee isn't dealing with the individuals. In fact, once you can start identifying a student, I get very concerned because we should not be talking about individual students. There's a strong privacy piece there, and I hope the public understands we don't deal with the individuals. That's you in the administration, and I got 100% confidence in the way you presented to us, not just tonight, but in the past, that as individual students have issues, you are there to support them and work through the issues. And I hope the community sees that through both what you've been talking about here as well as the other parts there. But I get cautious, or want caution, when people start reacting to these reports that are in the newspapers or these other pieces here, because like I said, once it gets down to these small groups here, it's a student. And we need to respect the privacy of that student, whether it was a personal choice or something in the process there. We shouldn't be singling out individuals or making it so that people can go, well, who was it? That's not where we need to be.
Or even just, oh, I know who they're talking about. Like, they're not even trying to find out who it was, but all of a sudden they just have a realization like, oh, that fits the profile of a family I know. You know?
Right, and that's the part that I want to push back against here, and you know, and ensure that we're focusing at the school committee level on, we got the whole programs in place. We're holding you accountable for those on it, and I appreciate you responding appropriately. I also appreciate you looking at the technical measures to make sure that if there was some kind of error in our reporting or something that's corrected, but I don't want the correction of the technical error affect people thinking that we're not concerned about our participation rates in our other aspects of the educational support we're providing. I want those kind of as two totally separate issues. And thank you.
Thank you, and I guess just last comment, when we were dealing with the Department of Education, they were really helpful to us. I mean, they were helping us dig through data as well, so they certainly don't want districts to have their accountability rate changed either, but they have rules and regulations to follow. And this is all tied in to federal funding. So the ESSA Act is a federal act, and it dictates how federal funds are used within various states. And the states have some latitude in determining how they develop accountability measures for their schools and districts. Thank you.
All right, at this point, there's a second point in our meeting for input from interested citizens. Seeing none, we'll go to subcommittee reports, PMBC.
Nothing specifically happening. We got a quick update, you know, I guess due to parts error issues. We're still waiting for some parts on the lift at Shaker Lane there, but.
Yeah, they've hit a small delay. There was the manufacturer forgot to ship an important piece. So they started the installation and then discovered that the piece was missing. And so they're working with the manufacturer to get that expedited. So there is a short delay in getting that new lift at Shaker Lane, but we're aware of it and working on it and pushing the contractor to get it done.
Yeah. And then at the meeting the other night, one of the members mentioned that they think in January MSBA MSBCA, whatever, is going to be having the next call for.
Yep, statement of interest.
Statement of interest
Yep.
there. They encouraged us to apply. I said that we're working the issues. We're also trying to get the timelines and the knowledge and information so that we
This
can
is
make sure-
relative to Shaker Lane. the
Relative to
building.
Shaker Lane.
Yeah, so
there.
if
That-
I,
they was asking me if we were applying for a grant at this point, and I said, right now, we're trying to make sure we understand the process so that we can explain to people where we're going. If we're ready in time, which I said I doubt we will be, but I don't know,
Well,
Anyway,
so-
I just want to mention, you probably already know, January, there'll be some
Right.
opening for funds.
right,
there.
so I did have a conversation with some, I'll make this real quick, somebody from, a representative from MSBA. She did tell me about the statement of interest. I asked if they sent out representatives to walk through the school before we did the statement of interest, so we could get some kind of inclination from them which way they thought we should be leaning, and she said no. It all starts with that statement of interest. The superintendent will get an email sometime in probably December that says the statement of interest is open. We can then submit a statement of interest, and that's where it kicks off that whole MSBA review process and
So given that,
possibly
is
getting
the
on a
statement
list.
of interest just a very general, just we are interested?
It's, we are interested, it identifies the deficiencies in the building, some of the issues that we're experiencing with the building, why we think we need
But
a
it's not a
renovation.
packet of information?
It's not a packet of information, it's just a statement of interest that says we're interested, we want
So
to
it could be
apply.
ready.
That statement of interest then gets reviewed by a board.
Right.
They get
Okay,
hundreds
that's
of
fine.
these a year, and then it gets, we might get invited to apply for the next step.
Gotcha.
We might not.
So we might very well be able to make that deadline.
I wanted to just mention it because Super Saturday is in
And the thing is
December.
there's really no harm or no foul. If you submit it and it's deemed insufficient, you just miss out on that one and you go for the next one.
Correct.
I mean, you could not make the cut for any number of reasons, whether it's because they deem your letter of intent to be insufficient, or they just deem the project is just not appropriate for this particular funding cycle, and you just go forward. So
Correct,
I
and
don't
that's-
see any harm in trying.
Correct, and the statement of interest does not lock us into either a redesign or build new school.
Right.
It doesn't identify any of that, it just says, we want to work with MSBA on this school, these are some of the issues, what, we want to get
And-
invited to
and
the next step.
Just to make sure, because we're going to be talking about this more often, but the idea of partnering with MSBA is to qualify for partial reimbursement on the project. But by doing so, you submit to the MSBA parameters for how the building is designed and built. If you don't want to submit to those parameters, you can just do whatever you want and pay for it out of pocket.
Correct,
And that's not what we've done in the past. We have partnered with MSBA.
correct.
I think the middle school and Russell Street, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if, I don't even know if the high school, the MSBA really existed when the high school project was
I
done.
think it was a 50/50 program back then,
Yeah,
but.
okay. So
it was
same
a
idea,
50/50
but-
program, but yeah. So, again, real quick, I have reached out to an architect that we've dealt with in the past that was involved in the Russell Street project. I'm trying to get them to come out. We missed getting together this week, but he's going to come out. We're going to do an initial walkthrough of the building, and he's going to help identify some of the deficiencies, ADA issues we may have, anything like that might help us go into that statement of interest, to help us through that process, so.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up and pushing it a little bit, and I push back to the PMBC members a little bit, is, the school committee needs to know what that whole process is. So, because once we submit something, we're going to get inundated with questions. You can look at the library as an example, right? Once their submission kicked off, it started raising questions about the whole life cycle. And if we don't understand that life cycle, we're just not going to be in a position to answer to the community or to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee that are going to, as soon as that application hits, they're going to go, well, how much are you looking for?
Right.
And
We won't know.
no, exactly. But if we can't explain the process, we'll
Yeah.
Correct.
just be subject to,
Correct.
Yeah, and they will not come out to tour the school at this point in time.
Yep.
It has to be farther along in the
Right.
process.
They might do that after they've reviewed the statement of interest. If it gets kicked to the next level, then they send a review team out.
So that arms
And
us
I'll-
for the conversations.
Right, and I'll be more than glad to put, there are checklists, and the process is identified on the MSBA webpage. I'd be more than glad to forward that link to the school committee, or even
No, I don't
print
think
out
it's
some
necessary at the
information and
moment.
put it in a
Just-
packet if you really want to read it.
We're
It's
good for
long
now.
and laborious
We're good for
and
now.
tedious.
No, like I said, I'd like, at some point, just a roadmap of the process.
Yep.
And what kind of milestones that we would be, needing to be thinking about. Knowledge that the application at this point doesn't lock you into a decision, right? I'm just picking up, not to mean to pick on the library, but their process set in motion a very specific course of action.
As will this one.
Right. Right. But we may-
Or when does that get locked in? We need to know those lock-in points.
Right. But we may want to, at some point in time, think about finding some funding someplace to do a feasibility study on the school, to do an actual, this is the plan, whatever that plan is, we will have to pay an architect, a design person, somebody to put that plan together.
Okay.
So,
All right, good on the PMBC?
Yep.
Budget Subcommittee, we set our meeting calendar. We'll start meeting next week. And then basically meet as we go through the process. We'll meet about once a month for October, November, and then pick up the pace as we get farther into it. Those meetings will be posted. Typically, they're 3:30 on Thursdays, opposite the weeks that we meet on Thursdays.
You don't want like a super long.
No, super long Thursday.
Super long Thursday.
That's it for that. Policy Subcommittee, we have a motion for a first reading.
Yes, we've been talking about this field trip policy for a while. Last meeting, I introduced some suggested language, and you can see it italicized at the bottom paragraph. It's reference to out-of-state day trips, so the additional wording, recommended wording would be out-of-state day trips must have advanced approval of the school principal.
I saw one just at the beginning of that paragraph where it opens with all out-of-state or extended. Probably should strike out-of-state or.
Right, that's what I was thinking too. It's a
Oh.
little ambiguous.
Yes.
It should just say all extended.
All extended, yep, for sure.
Because the next piece specifically clarifies
Yeah, good
out-of-state or
catch.
within.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then one other update in number 1, all students have, I guess, parent or guardian permission,
Yes.
or whatever the
That's
updated
interesting.
language.
That's been that policy for a long time. That whenever we send something out, it's always parent guardian, so I'll certainly add that in.
Thank you.
All right, so that's our first reading, so if we make those changes, we expect to bring it back for a second reading and approval at the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the first reading with the recommended changes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right. Do we have any other business? No need for an executive session, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Darrell?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, LCTV, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.